The other day, I watched a guy walk out of church in the middle of a sermon. I wasn't preaching, so probably didn't feel it quite as keenly as the preacher did. The preacher was doing a great job, no question of that. Actually, it was quite brilliant because it was his first time in that particular church context. It so happened he was showing a movie clip. It was of Martin Luther King's speech, "I've seen the promised land." We know that he preached it the night before he was shot and killed, which gives it a certain poignancy. The guy who walked out wasn't doing a great job for anyone, least of all himself. It reminded me of the important layman William Shepherd Allen, a generous benefactor for New Zealand Methodism in the 19th century, and we talked about him last week. He didn't walk out of the church, but he held some very strong opinions. He even claimed people who believed in biblical scholarship and Darwin's theory of evolution must be leading, quote, unnatural lives, unquote. It's that kind of statement that would make me want to walk out of a church. But Shepherd Allen did also say more understandably that the laity were totally against the new theories, and not a few clergy as well, he claimed. So we can fairly ask, how accurate were his perceptions? I checked the various primary sources like minute books, newspapers, and letters held in archives. For example, in Auckland, 1885, the Reverend T.G. Carr delivered a lecture on how to interpret the Bible. His audience? The Wesleyan lay preachers. Now, this group were typical of the time and were serious about being well informed within a lively fellowship. They had many intense discussions. The following year, 1886, the same lay preachers were introduced to Professor Henry Drummond's great book, Natural Law in the Spiritual World. Now, Drummond was one of the most widely read and respected authors of the time. An evangelist by nature, he was also a Free Church of Scotland minister. And in fact, a position was created for him to bring his love of science into the evangelical equation. But in the opinion of a Wesleyan lay preacher, Mr. Jessup, the book was a total failure. Well, today we see exactly the same kinds of debates happening in the National Methodist newspaper, Touchstone. Back in 1898, the Wesleyan ministers in Auckland fiercely debated various competing theological theories. The Reverend J. Chapman, for example, presented a paper, Evil and Evolution. He read it to 5 of his ministerial colleagues. It drew the ire of the Reverend J. H. Simons, who gave a very severe critique. The subject also generated considerable interest beyond the ministers, beyond the churches, into the wider community. And we can say with some confidence that just as science had finally gained a rightful foothold in the universities, it also couldn't be denied a place in the discussions of a well-educated ministry and laity. So Shepherd Allen's protests in 1893, that is, protests that most of the laity and clergy didn't believe in evolution and rejected the new ideas about the Bible, were overstated in my opinion. A genesis in science had been much discussed in Methodism before 1893 and was even more deliberately debated afterwards. But Shepherd Allen was far from alone in defending orthodoxy. What happened at the Dunedin YMCA shows how an entire city could be polarised. So join me next week on Through the Year with John Wesley for more about this, and thanks for watching.